Fairy tales and princesses often get stereotyped as being for children and portraying passive characters. However, this actually couldn't be further from the truth. And this is because fairy tales and princesses exhibit such powerful messages about courage, resilience, overcoming obstacles in life, softness, kindness, and love. And most of all, the transformation of the human spirit. And that is what I want to discuss today. Today's video is all about one of my favorite princesses, the theme and symbols and psychology of this story. When cruelty and pain exist, her courage and kindness persist. Of course, this is about Cinderella. This is the main message of Cinderella. She goes through so much in her life. She has such a difficult and traumatic childhood. She loses her parents, and then she has to live with her cruel and mean stepmother and stepsisters who are emotionally abusive towards her. And this is really rough for her. But with all of that, she still remains kind and courageous, has faith in herself, in her dreams, and most of all is loving. So I'm so excited to talk about Cinderella today because honestly, I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to make this video because Cinderella has been one of my favorite princesses since I was a little girl, and honestly one of the first figures in my life that I actually looked up to and found to be so brave. So I plan on dismantling the notion that princesses aren't strong, that they are weak, and that they are just demure and soft. That is not strength, because that is strength. So let's get into today's video. But before we do that, I just want to show you my mug. I love this mug so much. This is the carriage from the movie, which I will be talking about in the video. And of course, on this side is the glass slipper too. What a beautiful mug that Disney made. I love it so much. And I have my matcha latte. Let's get into today's video. Beepity boppity boo. So to start off, I want to begin discussing the beginning of the movie. I will be discussing both the animated version and the live action because that will give us a better, well-rounded understanding of Cinderella. And I love how the live action builds on the original animated version. So starting off with Cinderella's childhood, Cinderella went through a lot in her early childhood, losing her parents. In the live action, we see Cinderella's mother alive before she passes away and before she gets sick. And she represents the great mother archetype of being soft, warm, kind, and nurturing. She sets the tone for this story in a lot of ways, because Cinderella exudes the similar and same qualities of her mother. And that is kind of what helps give Cinderella that resilience and strength to endure what she endures. And even her mother says, "I want to tell you a secret. Have courage and be kind." This is what Ella takes upon herself to remember when her stepsisters and stepmother that she will meet are cruel to her. Unfortunately, her father, he's an amazing father in the sense that he is also so loving and caring and kind. But like Cinderella's mother and Cinderella, they see the best in people. And so he marries this Lady Tremaine, and he doesn't realize that she is not going to be the best stepmother, but nonetheless he's hopeful and he wants to give it a chance to be happy. But unfortunately, when he dies, Cinderella is left with Lady Tremaine and her stepsisters, which are Lady Tremaine's daughters, right? Drizella and Anastasia. That is where everything begins in this story, the real tragedy. Now, I want to discuss the importance of the attachment styles that Cinderella develops with her parents, because I noticed that her mother and father, because they had such a strong presence and they were this happy family, that they passed that on to Cinderella, that there's real love, right? Because a secure attachment, it represents having healthy boundaries and a healthy understanding of what a relationship is, healthy self-esteem, right? But an insecure attachment, such as anxious or avoidant, it can cause a person to believe that relationships aren't a safe space for them and to sort of retract. That can lead to a lot of issues. So, Cinderella, at least having those secure attachments to her parents before they died, it serves as a protecting factor, absolutely, for her. And most of all, what I see is, in psychology, we also learn that resilient children, despite going through so much adversity, let's say 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, so losing parents, right? And then having to process her stepfamily and this sort of the events that she goes through with that, it builds that resilience and she becomes this resilient child throughout. So she's a great example of what it means to be a resilient child that still can grow up into a healthy adult and have healthy relationships and be a healthy person who can live their life. She is great for that. Now, I'm going to be discussing so much about Cinderella's amazing qualities and her development. Let's move on to the symbolism that the stepmother and stepsisters represent, because the stepmother represents this villain and shadow archetype, and so do the stepsisters. Actually, they also represent that. They represent the aspects of self that are hurt, envious, and jealous, and they're trying to dim Cinderella's light and take away from her innocence and purity. They see her beauty as a threat without realizing that true beauty is actually a reflection not of who we are on the outside, but also of who we are on the inside. And that someone else's beauty doesn't diminish your beauty. Cinderella is so innocent. She is so kind, genuinely, and they are jealous of her beauty, her outer beauty, her inner beauty. And so they seek to destroy that in any way possible. And that's why after Cinderella's father dies, where does Lady Tremaine send Cinderella? She sends her to the attic. And I really want to discuss the symbolism of the attic, because the attic, it symbolizes at first isolation of Cinderella, isolating her in this dark, lonely place that is dusty with mice. And it's not very nice compared to the rest of the house, right? Which was this home of Cinderella and her mother and father. So sending her there was there to isolate her, to make her feel alone and horrible. However, when she did that, the thing is that the attic is so high up, it has light coming through it. And this represents Cinderella's higher spirits in a sense. Even though she's isolated, she's still in her own high spirits, right? She's at the highest part of the house. We associate the attic or in stories as being for the servant, which is what they treat her as. They treat her as this servant who is supposed to serve them, who's nothing. They absolutely want to degrade her. But like I said, because she's in the attic, it also represents her higher spirits and her hope, her ability to rise above what is trying to bring her down. Next in the story, Cinderella, she meets the mice and she's playing with the mice. And the mice represent this aspect of her which is very interesting because the portrayal of animals in stories can tell us a lot about characters. Cinderella treats the animals kindly. They help Cinderella, and Cinderella helps the mice. She helps them to not get trapped. It's ironic too, right? Because they're not the cleanest of animals. But Cinderella, she doesn't care. She doesn't care if they're mice or lizards or what they are. They're her friends at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how big or small, what their status is, but she treats them with absolute kindness. And that says a lot about her. Now, I also want to talk about what happens next in the story, right? So in the live action, they don't show this in the animated, but in the live action, Cinderella, she's had enough of the sort of cruelty of the stepsisters and stepmother. So she goes for a ride on a horse. And this kind of represents her desire and her imagination, her freedom, wanting freedom. The same way I believe the attic also represents that imagination and being free in a sense. Even if she's isolated, she's still in her own high spirits. So she goes on this horse and she rides away to the town. She sees this caribou, or what was it? A moose? Something of the sorts. And this moose is being hunted. But what does Cinderella do? She helps to free this moose because Cinderella cares about animals, about the innocent. And then the Prince Charming, comes along. He is like, whoa, who is this woman? He sees Cinderella as kind and caring, and he questions her, why do you care about this deer being hunted? And she stands up for it. She recognizes that it's wrong to kill it. She says, just because it's what's done doesn't mean it's what should be done. That's what she tells him. And it's interesting because this is where we see the dynamic of the prince and Cinderella begin in this story, of them understanding each other's spirit, their kindness, and who she is on the inside, because the prince had that similarly. He wasn't just drawn to any princess as we see just because of the way that they look. The prince, he could choose any beautiful woman in the whole kingdom or from other kingdoms, but he doesn't want any princess. He wants someone who he loves and who he can respect, admire, and cherish, which is like Cinderella. And he knows when he meets her that he wants to be with someone like her or her, really. And so it's interesting because when he goes back to the palace, he even says, just because it's what's done doesn't mean it's what should be done. Like her, he also wants to save the deer. He even introduces himself as Kit and not as the prince. Cinderella is so innocent that she doesn't even know he's the prince. And I think he likes this. And he says he's this apprentice. Cinderella, she doesn't care what he is, but she is just loving to talk to him because he's kind to her. And so she's grateful to be there. And so that's why when the prince sends the invitations to all the maidens of the kingdom to meet for marriage, he doesn't discriminate. Cinderella, she wants to go to the ball just to meet him because he works at the palace. But look at the stepsisters and the stepmother. All they can think about is wooing the prince, manipulating him even. They don't care about who he is on the inside. All they care about is the status and what they have to gain, because that's what they've been taught by Lady Tremaine. Now, what I want to talk about next is wanting to go to the ball. Cinderella assumes that she will be able to go to the ball because that was what was declared by the kingdom, that every maiden shall be there. But her stepfamily, they don't care. They want to keep her isolated in the attic as a servant. She's Cinderella. They do not care. And so what do? They rip her dress, which was such a hard scene to watch. Apparently, a lot of people actually feel similarly, that was a really hard scene to watch, where they rip apart her dress which is her mother's dress, and the animals helps put that dress together with the pearls and the sash that Anastasia and Gisela didn't want. But they're so jealous that they don't want to see her happy or anything. And so they tear that apart, and they're just trying to rip apart her purity. All they care about is their own ego. They want to be the best. They're so jealous and envious of Cinderella that they'll just do anything to use and abuse her. And Lady Tremaine teaches them that all men are a certain way. They don't actually care about love and this and that. And so the stepsisters, the issue is they learn from example of their mother. In psychology, we learn that children imitate and they learn by observation. So because children imitate their parents, we see that the stepsisters imitate their mother. And that is why they treat Cinderella so cruelly. Now I want to talk about where that leads Cinderella, because at this point she has been so courageous and hopeful. She has the ability to dream and still think good. She even says to Kit, when they meet, I forgot to mention this, she even says, they treat me as best as they can, is what she tells Kit in the forest when he asks her, how do they treat you, as in her home, because of the way that she was sort of on this ride trying to get away. And it's interesting because Cinderella, she has this consciousness, this self-awareness, this understanding. Cinderella is demure and mindful of the way that her stepsisters and stepmother treat her is a reflection of how they feel about themselves internally. She is so smart to understand that. And it's interesting, right? Because they tried to put her down and make her feel dumb and lesser than, but she's actually very smart and intelligent, although she is innocent. And next we see that she is giving up, and she starts to cry when they leave for the ball. Her dress is ripped and she's crying in the rain, and she's on the bench and she says, there is no point anymore. How can I have hope? And then the fairy godmother shows up. And what does the fairy godmother represent? Because the fairy godmother represents this mentor, but she also represents this unconscious or subconscious and conscious aspect of Cinderella. Subconscious in the sense that subconsciously she is Cinderella's imagination, right? But also she represents that conscious aspect of the mind, the super ego, the wise aspect of the mind that is telling you to do the right things, to have hope, to have faith in your dreams, have faith in yourself. And so the magic, it represents beautifying and personifying the inner beauty of oneself, because Cinderella's inner beauty is sort of transformed into her outer beauty. Whatever was on the inside was then transformed on the outside. And that's what they really show in Cinderella. Taking ordinary, simple things like a pumpkin or lizard and transforming that into something meaningful. And the fairy godmother also took average and ordinary things that were surrounding Cinderella, that Cinderella put effort into. They weren't necessarily royal, but they were ordinary things. The beauty of that is taking something ordinary and recognizing its value. Being able to recognize the value of something ordinary. So that was really interesting. So the fairy godmother does the bippity boppity boo. Cinderella transforms completely, goes to the ball with the glass slippers. She meets the prince, and the prince is wooed. The prince recognizes her in the live action that this is the same girl that he met in the forest. But, in the animated, he never met her before. But regardless, the prince was taken by her outer beauty, of course, but also her inner beauty and who she was on the inside. And I think they really wanted to emphasize this in the live action, which is why they had met before in the forest. It's a good thing that they meet because they both match each other's energy. Cinderella meets someone who exudes the same kindness and love that she does, and that matches her femininity with this masculinity, right? The prince truly cares about her, and he recognizes what the real value of a person is and what marriage and love is. He stands up for what's right. That is what a real prince is. Next in the story, Cinderella only has until midnight to live this moment for life, which reminds me of that song by Nicki Minaj and Drake, Moment for Life. And Drake even says, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. When he says that, that stands out to me as well, because Cinderella, in this case, she truly understands how to live and how to make the most of life. She understands the value of life. Whereas others, they don't truly understand the meaning of living honestly and with integrity the way that she does and the way that she sees life. I also loved how in the music video, if you watch the music video of Moment for Life, we see that Nicki Minaj dresses up as her own fairy godmother and as Cinderella, which is what I was saying, right? That the fairy godmother is a manifestation of Cinderella's subconscious mind, of her own belief in herself. So that was lovely to see. Next in the story, I want to discuss the symbol of Cinderella, because in the live action, we see that name Cinderella. It represents cinders. Her stepsisters call her cinders or cinder wrench as a way to degrade her and to make her feel less than. She's grieving. She is in pain. She is this servant to them. And so they try to make her feel horrible, like ashes and cinders. But really what that represents is that represents like a phoenix rising from the ashes or rising from the cinders, rising from one's darkness and transforming from the darkness, transforming one's pain into beauty. And in spite of that, being strong and powerful. So that was really, really interesting to see the cinders representing that. Now I want to talk about the meaning of the glass slipper and what the glass slipper represents. So we see that the glass slipper was left behind when Cinderella was running away to go back right before midnight. And it's interesting because everyone in the kingdom is trying to put this slipper on, but obviously, of course, it only fits Cinderella. So what does glass slipper represent? Well, it represents the fragility and purity of Cinderella. She is innocent and naive in certain ways, and what she goes through is so difficult and adverse, right? And yet she's also so pure at the same time. Her kindness reflects onto others and around her, such as the prince and the animals, and the way she transforms with the fairy godmother, still believing that fairy godmothers and magic is real. That is her purity of her spirit. Her purity and vulnerability is her strength. And so that is sort of what the glass slipper represents. But there's actually one more thing it represents. It also represents the ability to walk in someone's shoes, because everyone, if you think about it, tried to walk in her shoes, but they couldn't actually walk in her shoes. They couldn't even fit her shoe. I mean, Drusilla or Anastasia, their foot was God knows how big. They couldn't fit into this dainty glass slipper. And that was really interesting because a lot of people, they they could not even understand and conceptualize what she went through, her stepmother and stepsisters. And yet they wanted so badly the status that that slipper bought. Then we have Cinderella. Cinderella has empathy. She's not only able to walk in her own shoes, but also in the shoes of another person. I also want to point out that they said this quote at the end of the movie, which was, "Perhaps the greatest risk any of us will ever take is to be seen as we truly are." Cinderella, she is seen as who she truly is. She is both this plain and simple country girl, but she is also this princess. And for her to really see herself as she truly is, it reminds me of that scene in the animated movie where they're looking at themselves above the water. And when she sees herself, her reflection in the water, she sees herself as the princess. I thought that was beautiful because it's important to see yourself for who you are and not degrade yourself because of what life throws at you and what others try to make of you to put you down, right? Cinderella, she doesn't degrade herself. She doesn't lose hope and spirit or herself or her purity, her kindness, her innocence and beauty because of what others do and how they treat her. But she recognizes her own worth, stays true to herself. And so she sort of, in a way, manifests this prince and this lovelier life, that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And it's also important, if we can learn anything from Cinderella, to treat people with kindness, because I know life is hard, and even I have to practice this myself, that life is hard. And, you know, even when other people treat us unkindly, we should still try our best to live with integrity and good character, because it's important. The more we are kind and courageous, the more that we can see that in the world. And it only takes one person to be courageous and kind to transform the world. Cinderella meets the prince, and her words of saving the animal in the forest help change the prince. And then now the prince is not just marrying any woman, but he's marrying that woman who exudes the kindness that she does. So it takes one person to start, and one person to be hopeful, and one less person that isn't destroyed by the darkness, but rather becomes someone who can rise from the ashes or the cinders and bloom into something beautiful and become something beautiful. That is really important. So that's what I wanted to leave for this video. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making this video. I really truly did. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you thought about this video. I'd love to discuss in the comments below the symbolism and psychology of Cinderella with you. If you see anything that I didn't see, please let me know. But again, thank you for watching, and seize the day, my fellow sailors. Seize the day, as I like to say. Seize the day, boys and girls and sailors. Make your lives extraordinary. Okay.